I'll lead in here by saying it is nearly 2 years since you were sworn in as Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Energy. Can you talk about some of the high points from your time here at the Department of Energy?
Well, yeah, it's been an absolute honor. It's been a real thrill to see the bipartisan support for nuclear energy right now. I think my confirmation was a real signal that that was the case, even, starting out. And while I had been PDAS for a year before, becoming confirmed, I think that moment when I was confirmed was a real indication and a signal of how bipartisan nuclear energy was. It was a very bipartisan vote, which was more about the topic than about me. Some major highlights, of course, we want to keep existing reactors running, and I've seen, Diablo Canyon stay open when it was potentially destined to close. Palisades nuclear power plant has a hope of a future, even though it has shut down, and they're restarting that plant very soon, in just a couple of years. With Vogtle Unit 3 and 4 coming online, Vogtle 4 coming online today, fully operational, it takes us from the sort of 92 reactors or so we were at when I started, up through 93, 94. With Palisades, it'll be 95. And in a different world, we could have been walking backwards instead in allowing those reactors to shut down.
Right.
Yeah.
And advanced reactors, tons of progress, tons of exciting developments in that space as well over the past few years. Are there anything that stand out to you in terms of pushing the technology forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially with regard to the construction permit application with Kairos, fluoride salt-cooled high-temperature reactor, we're looking at, it's a real advancement in demonstration that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is ready to license advanced reactors. We've seen so much progress with the Office of Clean Energy demonstrations and the two big demos, TerraPower and X-Energy. But broadly, I think just every time I talk to people, there is more and more awareness of the incredible variety of new nuclear reactor technologies available and the ways that each of them could fit into a clean energy future. That It's not one size fits all, but that rather there will be reactors fit for purpose for a number of different purposes that'll be hard to otherwise decarbonize.
Right. And then, of course, we've seen historic investments over the past few years, especially with the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act. Can you talk a little bit about the investment we're seeing and the impacts that that's having on the nuclear space?
Yeah, in the last 3 years, in this Biden-Harris administration, what we are seeing is not an accident. It's not chance. This kind of investment is policy. This is President Biden's Invest in America strategy. This process, it starts with investing in the kinds of energy technologies that'll succeed in decarbonization while simultaneously helping with American jobs and prosperity in general. We want to see this transition move forward in a way that is deeply American and that supports, American lives.
Right, and a big part of that is securing a domestic supply chain for nuclear fuels. If that was a big part of the investment that's gone in to the nuclear energy space over the past few years, right?
Yeah, I think it's really a shame that the situation that has driven so much attention on our nuclear fuel supply is such an incredible, unjust attack from Russia on Ukraine. But it has focused a great deal of our attention on the trust we have to have in our fuel supply chains. When there are nations in the world willing to use fuel for energy as a weapon, and access to that fuel can be used to dominate and control other nations, we cannot allow ourselves or our allies and partners to be exposed to that. And the United States is ready to be a good partner in that more diverse fuel supply, but we have to work really hard to rebuild our capacity to displace that, Russian exposure that we have on the market and that our allies and partners have on that uranium market.
Right. One other big priority I know for this office is waste management. Can you talk a little bit about consent-based siting and the progress that we've seen there during your time at DOE?
I think it's really important that the American public see that the United States government is doing something rather than nothing. And while in the last administration there was no policy, no real forward movement on progress towards some solution, we are now in a position that we have restarted a consent-based process that had been started in the Obama administration. And that consent-based process focuses on centering communities and their interests with regard to where the ultimate, storage of spent nuclear fuel is, and potentially ultimately the disposal of spent nuclear fuel. Right now, we're focused on interim consolidated storage for spent nuclear fuel to reduce the number of locations across the U.S. where that fuel is currently stored. It's what we owe to communities, it's what we've promised the utilities, and trust that the U.S. government is moving forward rather than stagnating with regard to this policy is essential to the build out of new nuclear. Right. It makes perfect sense that the first question a reasonable person should ask when presented with the option for their community to have a new reactor, that question should be, well, what about the waste? Haven't you guys figured that out yet? And the answer needs to be, well, we're working on it, and we have a process that we believe will work. And we believe that this process, centering consent and centering communities, working from a sort of more ground-up approach with those communities, it has worked in Finland, for example, to cite their final repository, which is a much harder problem than an interim storage facility. And so we believe that not only is this the right way to go about the process, but it's also the most likely path to success.
Right. Thinking back over your time here at DOE, what was your best day in the office, if you had to pick one?
Sorry, I have to think about
No,
this.
it's fine. We've had a lot of good ones.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have thought about
It's all good.
I think the best day was at COP28. Our government stood alongside over 20 other governments and said, we see how necessary nuclear is going to be with regard to our 2050 net zero goals, that we will not get to net zero without tripling nuclear energy, and so we must try, and we pledge to try. That is earth-shaking, and I think it represents not necessarily what we believe to be a projection of what is likely. It's not even a reflection of what we believe is possible with the resources we have today from the federal government to incentivize a change. It's instead a declaration of where the numbers lie and what it's truly going to take, a declaration of fact, which is that we will need to triple nuclear energy to get to net zero in the United States. And that fact-based, data-focused policy has been the cornerstone of this administration, from my perspective, especially with regard to nuclear energy. And I think that was a really defining moment that we were succeeding.
Right. So you joined the Department of Energy from academia. What caused you to accept the job?
To be honest, it was a complete surprise that I was even being considered. It never occurred to me to work in the government. To be frank, Tariq Shah, the Secretary's Chief of Staff at the time, said to me, we're in a war with the climate crisis, and we need you on the front lines. And I can't say no to that. This is a very motivational value for me that, it is worth doing some public service to save the world, and we're doing nothing less. And so you got me right in the heart with that one, and I was powerless against it.
Well, we're glad you joined us. So now that you're returning to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, what has it been like working for the federal government? Did it match up with your expectations?
You know, it's so similar to academia, the way politics and bureaucracy shake out in an organization. And the government is very similar in that way. It's driven by hard workers who, you know, are focused on a major public driver. You know, in the case of universities, it's education and the workforce, the pursuit of knowledge, right? In the government, it's the prosperity of the American public. But the bureaucracies are similar in a lot of ways. I've learned certainly how to expand my skills to manage a much larger portfolio. The Office of Nuclear Energy has been an honor to work in. The people have amazed me, and I think, generally speaking, the thing I will take away the most is an incredible respect for the public servants in the U.S. government. The public has no idea the amount of care and concern and work that is put in every day within walls of an agency like this one. The Department of Energy is working so hard every day for the people of the United States, and seeing it firsthand is really breathtaking.
How does it feel when you look back at the progress we've made over the past few years? Do you feel like we've made huge strides, or you feel like there's still just so much left to be done?
Can I say both? I think both is true. Yes, we have made huge strides. We are now walking forward. We should be running forward with regard to new deployments of nuclear energy. But, you know, we could be walking backwards. And I think that shift in the direction is so important. And we're in a place where that momentum, I think, is going to stick with us. The last couple of years, I think, has cemented some of that momentum. But we could easily lose it if implementation doesn't move fast enough. And again, the fate of humanity is very much at stake. We look out towards a future where I intend to be alive in 2050, and if we haven't reached net zero by then, my understanding is that there will be profound climate impacts. And I think there's no question in the scientific world that we're not moving fast enough to decarbonize. And so while we're moving very fast, and I'm so proud of us for moving as fast as we are, we've got to move so much faster, especially when we think about the tripling of nuclear energy goal. Building 200 new gigawatts of nuclear power between now and 2050 is going to be hard, but it'll have a lot of benefits. Huge workforce increase, a lot of American jobs, a lot of long-term good paying American jobs will come out of this. And there will be communities that maybe will transition from fossil emitting, particulate emitting coal plants in their communities to clean air nuclear plants in their communities. And we'll be able to continue to serve the energy world. I think that's the only just way to go forward, and not doing so would be not just unjust, but unmerciful.
Do you carry with you a sense of optimism as you depart the Department of Energy, or is it kind of more on the trepidation about the future of nuclear energy and the future of our battle against the climate crisis?
I am an incurable optimist. It is impossible for me to look towards the future and not see the immense possibility. With what we know, with the technology we have, with the capabilities I know we have demonstrated, and the sort of strength of our enthusiasm as Americans, as people and citizens of the world, the sky's the limit. Is my understanding of the challenge a little bit more nuanced and textured? Yes, I have a lot more texture and understanding of the nuances of the challenges that truly face us, and they are immense. And a lot of them are associated with, the nature of capital investment or the intricacies of mega project deployment. These things are big, hard, gnarly problems. They're not just complex, but they're complicated. And I think I have a better understanding of all of that, but it doesn't dull my optimism.
Right. Do you have any parting words as your time at DOE comes to a close here?
Well, I think I'm a big nerd. And so I think about the Lord of the Rings sometimes. And there's this moment where, Bilbo says that he misses his books and his armchair and he's had enough of adventure. But, I will say, just like the Lord of the Rings, I'm sure this adventure will be the sort of the tapestry beyond which I will always be so proud of this. And, like Bilbo, I will think back on it fondly and often.
Well, we will think back on this time fondly as well. From all of us at the Office of Nuclear Energy and Department of Energy, thank you for your time here and best of luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you.